On September 11th, 2001, as the 21st century was barely 9 months old, the most horrendous terrorist attack ever was committed in the United States when two planes destroyed the twin towers that made up the World Trade Center in New York. Over 3,000 people were killed. This atrocious attack was later claimed by Al-Qaeda, the radical Islamist group whose leader, Osama bin Laden, was then living under the protection of the Taliban regime of Afghanistan. Since then, increasingly, religion, any religion, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, and others still, has been put forward to justify sectarian violence, hate crimes, war crimes, and other atrocities still, committed against fellow human beings. Therefore, one might think, does the world still need religious liberty? Isn't that something that may have been fine in the past, but is now making the present look too grim for this world of ours, thus jeopardizing the future too? Shouldn't we ban religious liberty as a whole? Well, put that way, would you call this question an absurd postulate? Anyway, one has to think beyond the violence, the sectarian violence, committed in the name of religion. That is what makes it possible to understand that religious liberty is by no means a threat to this world, whether in the present or for the future, but a right, a full-fledged human right that everyone on earth should be allowed to enjoy. First and foremost, religious liberty is indeed a human right. Since 1948, it has been a part of the rights enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 18 of the Declaration provides, "Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance." In time, as international human rights law expanded into several other instruments, including treaties that become binding on any state that ratifies them, religious liberty found a due place in many of these instruments. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the European Convention on Human Rights, the American Convention on Human Rights, and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, to name but a notable few. On November 25, 1981, the United Nations adopted a declaration on the elimination of all forms of intolerance and of discrimination based on religion or belief. For a number of years, the Association of World Citizens had worked hard to have UN member states get past their initial hesitancy and finally affirm the right to religious liberty for each and every human being. That was 40 years ago, but even today, 20 years after 9/11, religious liberty continues to be denied in too many parts of the world, as religion, any religion, gets misused and turned into an instrument of political oppression, sometimes worse. In some cases, the question is where religious liberty ends and the necessities of public order begin in a democratic society. For several years, France and Quebec have been struggling with the issue of headscarves worn by some Muslim women. Should women civil servants be allowed to wear them while on duty? Should Muslim high school students be allowed to wear them in class? How should society get religious liberty and equality before the law to live together? A complex issue, in which everyone should have their say. But it cannot be more than a society based on tolerance and democracy can achieve. In other cases, a lot more serious, people get victimized, tortured, sometimes killed, for being believers of what is viewed as a bad religion. The latest and most infamous example thereof is arguably the terrorist organization which calls itself the Islamic State in Iraq and the Levant, better known under its acronym in Arabic, Daesh. Initially a minor jihadist group taking part in the civil war in Syria, Daesh grew exponentially in 2014, defeating the armed forces of Iraq, smashing the revolutionary forces that were fighting the Assad regime in Syria, and seizing substantial parts of territory from both countries to create what it called a caliphate. The summer of 2014 saw a rampage of religious-based violence by Daesh militias against the Yazidis in Iraq, as well as the Christian minorities of Iraq and later of Syria too. The Association of World Citizens took the matter to the UN Human Rights Council, urging for a special session before the regular session that was to begin on September 8th. That special session did take place a week before, on September 1st. From the outset, we wrote that Daesh had been committing a genocide against the Yazidis, and it took the UN no less than a full year to start using that word too. Speaking of Syria, we should also mention a case of denial of religious liberty that prompted us to send an appeal to the government of Turkey, one of the main stakeholders in the Syrian conflict. This case was about Sefer Bilecen, also known as Father Aho, a monk of the Syrian Orthodox Church. He was sentenced and jailed on disputable charges of aiding a terrorist organization, just because he had given some bread to two people who had come to his mountainside monastery asking for help. Two people who happened to be members of the outlawed Kurdish Workers' Party, although they had not introduced themselves as such to Father Aho. Expressing charity toward others should never, ever land anyone in the slammer. Headscarves banned in predominantly Christian countries. A monk jailed in another country where a Muslim religious party is in power. Two instances of religious intolerance in opposite directions but really pointing to one same issue. How can we live in peace? How can we all live free, knowing that the right to religious liberty can be violated anywhere in the world, anytime? The answer may well be in the very words of Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which I mentioned earlier, either alone or in community with others, and in public or private. Most of the time, attacks on religious liberty happen because one form of worship has to be eradicated, obviously in the minds of violators. People going to the church, the synagogue, the mosque, the temple to pray together. That's more than their complete lack of tolerance can take. But then, let's remember the meaning of religious liberty. Primarily an individual freedom, freedom to worship or not, freedom to believe or not, freedom to do something or not, freedom to organize one's inner spiritual life as they see fit. After all, neither the state nor organized religion can control what is in our minds, let alone find out what it is. It belongs to us, and to us alone. On the part of any political or religious leader, claiming otherwise would be nonsensical. Thus, religious liberty means sanity, a psychological notion translated into a legal right by virtue of common sense, plain common sense, that common sense we find everywhere in the world, across political, religious, cultural, linguistic borders, everywhere. That common sense which unites world citizens from all backgrounds and walks of life. Religious liberty means freedom and harmony within one's very soul. It is the foundation for a healthy mind, for healthy relations with others in society, and ultimately for a healthy society at all levels, local, national, regional, and ultimately global. Religious liberty is a human right that everyone should be allowed to enjoy, a human right that every world citizen must defend, for without it, we cannot build any solid hopes for world peace.